Hey everybody, welcome to the Blue Chip Podcast by fans for fans. This is your host Cody Potter. How y'all doing today? So we're going to get this mock draft going. It's going to be a 7-round mock, Commanders only. Pretty straightforward thing what we're going to do. We've done a few of them here already. Like I say, my picks don't change very, very much. I love the players that I love. I think it's pretty straightforward. We're going to use the simulator. So I don't have control with any of the picks that are going on around me. But let's just jump right into it. We'll start this draft right here. See how these picks go. So let's drop these down. I kind of always forget to do this part when I'm doing this. Let's see who is going before us. So we got Fernando Mendoza, Jeremiah Love to the Jets. They're starting to get that Jeremiah Love to the Jets love. I think that would be pretty wild, with Breece Hall and everything there. But Jeremiah Love is that type of player. I've said this multiple times. Now that Francis Maui-Noah is going to the Cleveland Browns at 6. I've said that any offensive player that goes before us just leaves another really, really talented defensive player that's going to, be on the board available for us. Basically, as you can tell, Sonny Styles went to the Giants, Ruben Bain to the Tennessee Titans. That means that David Bailey is on the board. Something that I don't really expect. You could talk about schematical fits with the Commanders going to run probably more 3-4 base front, things like that. So realistically for me, my favorite player for the last 3 years in college football has been the same player. I've talked about David Bailey. We've talked about David Bailey. We've talked about Caleb Downs a lot. We've talked about Mansour Delane. We've talked about a lot of these players. Daniel Thieneman. I'm going to keep it pretty easy for me. I love Caleb Downs. Do I know if Adam Peters would pass on David Bailey for Caleb Downs with the measurables, the highway speed, everything that David Bailey offers you? I don't know. I do have a blue chip grade on David Bailey, but I have a blue chip grade on Caleb Downs in total. The tape is king for me. My favorite player in college football for the last 3 years has been Caleb Downs. There's a reason Sean Taylor's picture is on my wall. We've this safety position has been, a revolving door. Caleb Downs to me is one of the premier players in college football on tape. He's a one of one to me as far as, you don't see this type of player very, very often. Which led to one of my other favorite players in this draft at Treydon Stukes being available. He's a nickel kind of, nickel corner, safety prospect. I think he's a really, really elite player when it comes to the nickel position. I think he's a really, really good player right there. Let's see. We're just going to go down this board. We have Chandler Rivers, who is a really, really good player who I really, really like at the cornerback position. I think he fits that mold of a Mikey Samerstill guy. I think he does play outside. He's really, really good, really, really instinctual. Let's just keep going down. I'm going to go to the next page. I'm just going to try to feel out where a lot of these players are. I think I know the player that I'm going to go with. I just want to see where we're at as far as, Bud Clark, CJ Daniels, player that I really, really do love. We're going to have to go back down all the way. Just checking some names, man, just seeing where we're at. I know that I've done these mocks and I've never been in a position to get a CJ Daniels on this team. I really, really do like Elijah Surratt. Really, really good player. The wide receiver position is pretty deep in this draft. Romello Height is a guy that we've had visited here quite a few times. Going down here, just looking at these players, Dalen Everett is a corner that I do like. I think he has a really, really good skill set. Ted Hurst from Georgia State. Let's see. Mike Washington Jr., man, this is kind of hard for me to pass on this player, but I'm going to go the direction that I feel like this team would go. I think the Jonah Coleman, another player that I really, really do love. All right, well, I'm going to go with the direction that I think this team would go. I think it'd be really, really hard for this team to pass on Mike Washington. Being my probably third running back available in the draft. I think both of the Notre Dame boys are the two best, but Mike Washington is right there. I mean, really, really talented player. We haven't talked about him too much, so I just want to get into it. I mean, you see the grades, you see the rushing yards per carry average is really, really good. 8 touchdowns, got some receptions. He is a receiving back. He can do all the things. Showed elite level measurables, man. Elite level measurables. Arkansas has some things in their own right. They have a running quarterback. This guy would understand the nuances of playing with a quarterback like Jaden Daniels. He's got the size and the power. He's got the ball carrier vision. Romello Height's another guy that I really, really do like. And then to a guy that we talked about, on the pod as far as being available at pick 71. This guy has elite level measurables, man. I mean, almost 1,000 yards, targets 129, 71 receptions, yards per reception, 6 touchdowns. I mean, this Ted Hurst is a player that I'm really, really high on in this draft. I've talked about the center position. I could really go a lot of ways with this pick. I mean, we could talk about trades. I could look at the trades that are being proposed to us right now. Romello Height is a guy that we've had on, top 30 visit and things like that. I mean, we've visited with Romello Height multiple times. I think there's a real world where that pick would be a real possibility to us. Let's just go the direction that I think this team would really, really want to go. I think there's a world where this is realistically the way that the first 2 rounds in this draft pan out. So I'm going to go with Ted Hurst, the wide receiver for Georgia State. Even with Mike Washington available, who is a player that I really, really do love. I think this team is going to want to get Jaden Daniels, a player that has a skill set that we do not have on this team. This has kind of been the range right here as far as in the 5th round, where I'm finding it hard in our mocks, man. I've been doing mocks and it's the same names as far as the PFF format. Every format's different. If I was using other formats, I'm sure there would be, like I see Jay Daniels available to us. I've taken Katron Allen multiple times on this format just because that was probably the best player that I was seeing available to us. Let's see. I know when I did this last time, I had scrolled down, and this was the player that I ended up taking was Keon Black, or Kaelon Black. I really, really do love the way this guy runs, man. Physical. This is kind of why I didn't go the Mike Washington direction. I think this team needs a guy that can consistently pick up yardage, that can consistently be a really, really good player for this team. I'm doing this a little bit differently. I'm scrolling down. I passed on the centers, which, to me is something that I don't know if this team would do with necessarily the needs, and then, filling in with one of the best players available. I mean, all the top centers, as far as the top 4 guys for me, were all available in round 3. I don't know if they would pass on those guys. I think they would have higher grades maybe on them than, maybe a Ted Hurst, but I think Ted Hurst has a skill set to where they're gonna look at it, they're gonna see it, and they're gonna just understand that Ted Hurst brings you something that realistically you're not getting in a lot of other players. And when I haven't picked wide receiver in the third round, Xavier Thomas has been a player that I've really really been kind of high on. He has exceptional speed and exceptional skill set. Let's see. I'm just kind of going down here and just kind of looking at names because as I've said, man, round 5, round 6, this is kind of where it's been. It's a pick your preference kind of thing. I can scroll down. The simulator is going to grade me based off of certain things and certain measurables and the way that they have players ranked. But as you could tell, if you look at the board and the way that it falls, all these top-rated players, when they're available round 5, they're still available round 6, and then they're still available to me round 7. Clearly the teams are starting to pick certain things, and that's just how the simulator works. So again, man, we're just kind of looking for some certain preference style players. Kind of looking through this list. Gentry's a pretty good player. Jalen Husky is a guy that I really, really like. Don't know if you're going to go the Jalen Husky route with making, basically you sign Nick Cross, then you draft Caleb Downs in round 1. I think you're getting to a point where the safety position kind of gets log jammed at that point, even though I do think that Jalen Husky could be a nice developmental piece. I just think that he gives you something that you already have in a lot of these guys. Taylon Green could be a wide receiver. A quarterback prospect that you could look to develop behind Jaden Daniels. So let's go back to page 1. Jamar Taylor, we already got. Kaylon Black, Pat Coogan is a center that I could really, really see this team going with. He's a little bit smaller, but I tell you, man, if you watched Indiana and you watched the way that these guys played at Indiana, I think Pat Coogan is a guy that can really, really play in the league. And maybe for whatever they say, man, I think this would definitely be the direction that I would go, is Pat Coogan, the center from Indiana. I think that would shore up. Since you didn't get your center in round 3 with all the top guys that were available to you and there. Now at this pick right here, this is where the value just gets a little bit too high for me. This is a true free safety prospect, man, and that's where I'm pretty much going to go, because as I said, the same names that were available to me with my last pick are still available to me with this pick. So somewhere along the line of these boards, teams have been picking players that have not been high on the board, so they're going to grade them however they want. But I talked about log jamming the position with Jalen Husky. Well, this is a guy that can play the true free safety position. This is a guy that gives you the grades. We can look at the PFF grades just if you want. I do have him graded a little bit higher than this round. I don't really think he's going to be available realistically. But when you see the 90.7 overall grade, the tackles are what they are. The missed tackles are the thing for me. When it comes to this player and Bishop Fitzgerald, but when you talk about coverage grades and things like that, this guy is a really, really, really good player, and he's a local kid. This is a guy that I think, you get Caleb Downs for the strong safety position, things like that. You're going to interchange him a little bit, mix and match with Nick Cross to try to get the best pairing that you can get out of those two. I think Bishop Fitzgerald is an option for this team that you really, really could look at. There's other players like Bryson Eason that I could really, really see us looking for. A big, interior, disruptor kind of, player that has some really, really high level upside that would fit into that 3-4 defense at about 315 pounds. Tyron Montgomery is a guy from John Carroll, another smaller school guy. I don't think you're going to go at the wide receiver position and pick 2 smaller school guys. It's more of a gamble. I think you'd want more of a sure thing there. You could look towards Cole Brevard. That probably is more of a 3-4 defensive end type of player. Let's actually just go with the Bryson Eason of the world, man. Let's get yourself a 3-4 defensive, nose tackle type of player that can really, really play the nose. You got Javon Kinlaw, you got, Johnny Newton, you got Deron Payne. All those guys can play 3-4 defensive end. They got the size, the explosive, and versatility to be able to space eat and eat up blocks. I mean, outside of Johnny Newton, I don't think he's going to play at the 3-4 nose position and things like that. You've also added a player from the Giants and things. Realistically, if Adam Peters was on the clock and those were the names that were available to him, he's probably going Bishop Fitzgerald and get you another, safety developmental piece for long term. And long term, maybe you're looking at Caleb Downs and Bishop Fitzgerald actually locking up the strong and the free safety position for this team. Nick Cross, even though he is a guy that I really thought was going to get a 4-year, multi-year contract, ended up signing here for pretty damn cheap for 2 for $12. So again, that's just the way that I'm seeing this. This is a cornerback that I do really like in the later rounds, developmental wise. Man, he graded out really, really good this year. Passer rating is really good. Did not play last year. I think there were some injuries and things like that. 52 targets, 22 receptions. Not a high yardage countage. Everybody says Toledo is a different level, but they're putting out some players that are really, really good. TJ Hall, this is another guy. I think he has the measurables and things like that you're going to look for from the cornerback position. Grading out pretty damn good, almost 80%. 1 touchdown given up. 30 catches on targets, but he's giving up more yards. But in Indiana, they're giving up a little bit, man. But he's a pretty solid player in his own right. Let's see. Henry, the UTSA running back. We already kind of addressed running back. We're not going to kind of go in that. We're not going to double up in that market. We've signed enough running backs on this team over the course of this offseason. Now, we could end up getting a Jalen Daniels developmental piece at quarterback. Vincent Anthony Jr., the edge from Duke. I think he is more of a hand in the dirt kind of guy, but he does have the explosive level traits. Let's go Andre Fuller right here to close this draft out. Cornerback prospect, kind of give you a long-term, asset that you can kind of develop. Has everything that you look for. So again, let's get this draft. I mean, I'm sure this grading is going to be a little bit off. Typically, I'm hovering around a B+. I don't usually scroll down too much. Usually, there's some value there for me. But again, as I said, in the 5th, the 6th round, a lot of the names that are still available from the 5th round, are available in the 6th round. So it's always kind of a thing. So it was more about pick your preference and things like that. So let's see what they did. They gave me a D on Kaylan Black, like I said, because they're basically saying that Le'Veon Moss was available to this team, and a lot of these grades are graded off a need. When you think about the way the PFF is grading these things, they grade off of needs. C for Ted Hurst. They're talking about a little bit of a reach there. Of course, the biggest reach that they're saying that I made was Kaylan Black. I don't grade Kaylan Black as I grade him as a fringe 3rd, 4th round running back. I really, really like what he offers. I think he has starter level upside. I think he's a really, really good player. Obviously, Jeremiah Love went number 2 to the Jets, so again, that wasn't really a thing. But Pat Cogan is a guy that I really do like. If I can't get a center in round 3, which is, why I kind of went the Ted Hurst route, I felt like I could get Cogan. I've seen his name multiple times, round 5, round 6 available to this team. I kind of went best player available, as far as a player that I'm not going to get in a Ted Hurst, Georgia State. Caleb Downs, self-explanatory and things like that. We can kind of go over here and we can kind of look at how this draft board fell for the first round. Talk about some names that I think are also going to be in play for this team. Jermon McCoy, the cornerback from Tennessee, going number 20. I think he's done everything that he needed to do this offseason without playing college football last year, due to the knee injury. I mean, Jermon McCoy has probably the most upside of any cornerback in this draft. We've talked a lot about Mansour Delane, who went to, let's see. Mansour Delane ended up going 15 to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Daniel Thieneman is a really, really good player. David Bailey, 9 to the Kansas City Chiefs. Carnell Tate was pretty much the player that I thought would go next, just given the need, things like that for the New Orleans Saints. Carnell Tate was a player that would have been, available to that was available to us that I could see, there being a world where he is the pick. To get Jaden Daniels that weapon. I've done mocks where I've done Carnell Tate. I've done mocks where I've, if David Bailey did fall, I pick David Bailey. Truth is I just don't know if there's a world where I can necessarily look at this and I just don't think I can pass on Caleb Downs, man. I think Caleb Downs is that guy. I think he's a one of one. I don't think you're going to get a Caleb Downs at any point in the draft, even in a safety class that I do love. It's really, really hard to try to assimilate value when there's, value throughout the draft at the safety position. As I talked about, Bishop Fitzgerald, whether it was VJ Payne being available to us in the third round, Bishop Fitzgerald later, available to us later in the fifth round. There's going to be safeties. Michael Taft, in the third round. There's really good safeties in this draft, but I'm telling you, like, for all the things that I do love about the safety class throughout this draft, there's a bunch of them. The TCU safety, the Arizona safety that was available to us at the top of the third, and he was the highest graded player on the PFF board, and he probably would have been the highest graded player, one of the highest graded players that was available on my board. I know along the lines that I had Stukes and I had Ted Hurst graded very, very similarly on my board. So again, I took Ted Hurst. Do I know if they would pass on Romello Height for Ted Hurst? That I don't know. The draft is very, very unpredictable. It's very, very hard to predict these things. I tried to go for the positions that I think this team would address, given the players that were available. I tried to go at the positions that I think we're going to pick probably around each round, more so than maybe what I would have done in each pick for this round. This is more of how I feel like this team would try to address this draft. Certain players' names might change. It could be C.J. Daniels instead of Ted Hurst, depending on how they feel about C.J. Daniels or Ted Hurst or, the Chris Brazzles of the world. I talked a lot about Chris Brazzle and his size and his vertical ability to stretch the field down the field. I know that, I'm sure this team really, really wants to get Jaden Daniels that piece down the field that can just vertically eat up yards. I think Ted Hurst is a guy that can do it. I think he just wins a different way than Chris Brazzle. I think Chris Brazzle, just elite level speed with that 6'5" frame. I mean, he gives you something in the wide receiver position that you're not going to get from many players. Ted Hurst is a skill set coming from Georgia State that he's going to go up. He's definitely going to go up to level of competition. I think his physical nature really, really does excel. I think the way that he runs his routes, I think how hard he plays, I think the way that he can win after the catch. I think Ted Hurst is a guy that can very, very much exceed expectations as far as coming out of a Georgia State and really, really making a play. And Bryson Eason, as I said, you see the A- grade. It's a need meets it's everything that we would need for this type of defense. Being able to get rotational snaps at the nose tackle position. I think he can play the nose tackle position. He's played two gap over there at Tennessee, so he knows how to play the run and things like that. I think this was a guy that could come in and play some really, really valuable snaps on early downs and get some developmental traits. Kind of learn as he goes as far as excelling in the pass rushing department, or getting pass rushing pressure, getting centers back on their heels and things like that, pushing them into the quarterback on pass rush downs. And then Andre Fuller, the cornerback from Toledo, that's a developmental piece, guy that's probably going to have to make his name as his start on special teams and things like that. But again, has a skill set, the coverage grades and the coverage ability and the way that I look at him with his feet and his hips and things like that. I think this is a guy that, again, would be going up in, level of competition and things like that. As I said, man, the draft simulator, of course, as it gets to the draft, as it gets closer, there's always going to be times where you're like, man, I'm getting all my guys. This is the part of the season where, as it's kind of falling to me, it didn't really matter who I've picked. As I've done these simulators, kind of before, I've been noticing a lot more lately that the players that are becoming available to me in the third round and it's the fifth round, it's not really linking up where it's like, oh, I picked this player and then another really, really good player at the position that I didn't take in the third round is available to me in the fifth. Because again, I've said it multiple times. I think the edge class in this draft is really, really going to be a deep, special. I'm not really finding the grades for the players that were there. Caden Curry, I think, was there, I just really, really wanted to get this team a running back, and I know that there were higher graded players on their boards. Kalen Black, for me, is probably the highest graded player at that point that I would have been able to find. I think he is a guy that can start in the NFL. I don't know if he would beat out Ja'Cory Cross-Merritt to start initially, but I think that's a guy that if Ja'Cory Cross-Merritt has the lapses that he had, for the reasonings that they had as far as the pass blocking department and things like that, something that I know Kalen Black is really, really good at. He excels in all those things. Kalen Black is a guy that realistically could push Bill Ja'Cory Cross-Merritt to be the best version of himself, and then if he wasn't, he could fill in, and I know could really handle the load as a primary running back in this league. And then the Pat Hogan of the world again. That's why I said I went Ted Hurst in round 3 to kind of get that, because I knew that I could get a center that I trust, that has the size, has the athletic markers, and it was just really, really steady, anchoring that offensive line in Indiana. I know he can make the calls. I think he's mentally, a little bit more advanced than what you're going to find from a 5th round center in most, a 5th or a 6th round center in most drafts. So again, because I like the center class in this draft, that's why I wanted to address the position. So again, this is my mock for the Commanders, 7-round mock. The names can change. You can be interactive with me. You can tell me you like the picks. You can tell me you don't like the picks, or however you want. You can say that I'm crazy for, going Caleb Downs over David Bailey. You can say whatever you want. I think it's more schematical. I think the safety position is going to be very, very impactful in what Durante Jones wants to do on the back end of this defense, because I don't think the cornerback position has ever really, really been predicated to him as being more of an important position. I know he did have Derek Stingley with his time with LSU, but again, that wasn't him being a defensive coordinator and calling the plays on that defense. So again, Caleb Downs he's just the one of one for me, man. He's the guy that I can't pass on no matter who it is. Like him and Jeremiah Love are just guys that I will not pass on. I don't really, really care who's on the board. And we all know that I love Rueben Bain Jr. If Rueben Bain Jr. was still on the board for me, just because of the schematical fit, I'm still picking Caleb Downs. So again, I think Caleb Downs is just a very, very special player. That's how much I grade him. That's where I have him. So that was a pick that I just had to make. Do I know if Adam Peters would go that way because of the measurable markers that Caleb Downs has? No, I don't really know. But I do know that what Caleb Downs offers this defense, what he is as a player, it's second to none. And I think the impact that he would have would be the biggest of any addition that we could make on this team outside of maybe a Jeremiah Love. I think it is more of an impact than, collectively to other players that he's going to play with. I think him and Nick Cross would be amazing together. You got two very, very rangy, physical, sure tackling safeties that really, really can, lurk and play very, very disruptive in the box. I think you can interchange them and things like that. I think they both can play the responsibilities on the high end of the, team, what they need if they need to go 3 deep and things like that, or play a 3 deep shell. Both of those guys can very, very much play them zone assignments. They can get to the points on the field that they need to get to. They can bait quarterbacks, and they have the, the playmaker ability to make a play on the ball if the ball's in the air. So again, that's kind of my reasoning for doing this draft this way. I'm giving you guys some different names. We're getting closer to the draft, so of course the names are getting reported a little bit more heavily and things like that. I just think that no matter what this team does, I think in pick 71, I think wide receiver is going to be the position that we lean to. So, I mean, whether it's Ted Hurst, CJ Daniels, whether it's Brazel, whether it's Skylar Bell that, would maybe potentially be available to this team. I don't think a Chris Bell is going to be available to this team, but he's a guy that I've talked about, multiple times too. Again, depending on who is available at that point with 71, whether it's, from the simulator standpoint, it was Ted Hurst for me. I think wide receiver is going to be the position that this team is picking up at 71. They're going to hopefully try to strike gold again, in that 3rd round, from Terry McLaurin being a 3rd rounder to, getting a Ted Hurst and hopefully giving Terry McLaurin a guy that can develop across from him, that is an outside wide receiver that has a physical makeup and a physical marker that this team hasn't had in a long time. It's not that we haven't tried to pick that with whether it was Josh Doxson or certain guys. You go back to the Malcolm Kellys, the Devin Thomases of the world. It isn't that we haven't tried to pick physical 6'2", 220 wide receivers that can, they can win above the rim and be physical and be, truly athletic and everything like that. it just hasn't worked out for this team for a variation of reasons. It's not that we haven't had players like that we've, gotten in free agency or signed from other teams. It's just it hasn't worked out in the draft for multiple reasons and things like that. But Ted Hurst was the guy that I wanted to put there. So again, thank you guys for checking out the pod, man. I thank you guys for, everything, all the, comments, anything that you do with interactive and things like that on the format. But, we're chugging along. I think we're about 15 days away from the draft. So we're getting there. We're getting there. And I'm very, very excited to, report on these things. I'm going to probably do a 2-round mock, which will only be 1 pick for the Commanders, but it'll be every team kind of go off of my board and things like that, and things how I see the draft. And I think it'll be very, very fun, very, very formatted thing. And yeah, again, so thank you guys for checking out the pod, and thanks for everything you guys do. This is Cody from the Blue Chip Podcast. Have a blessed week. Peace.